Hello and welcome back to LionTree's podcast. I'm Alex Michael, and today we've got a guest who sits at the intersection of creativity, business, and technology, which is why we're having him for a record third time on the cast. His name is Scott Belsky. Scott is here, and he's now a partner at A24, the popular independent film and TV company, and the founder of A24 Labs, the studio's new AI and innovation arm. In his words, the mission is simple: help creatives experiment more. And I'm sure Scott is doing that every day. And of course, many of you know Scott from the years leading product strategy and design at Adobe. Before that, he founded Behance, which he successfully exited, and he invested in companies like Pinterest, Uber, Airtable, Ramp, and a lot more. He writes a newsletter that everyone should check out called Implications. He's also the author of a great book called The Messy Middle, which you should all check out. And we're so excited to have Scott here because he's going to walk us through his predictions for 2026. And we'll do a look back at his 25 predictions. It's something not to miss. Scott, thank you for being
It's good to be here.
Thank you. You're part of the very rare three-timers club here at the LionTree podcast.
It must be a good sign.
It is a great sign. You're a very important, thoughtful person. So thank you for coming back again.
LionTree, so I'm happy to be here.
Keep going. Thank you. It is truly a thrill to have you here. We have a lot to discuss. In fact, when we look back at, we've done 120 plus episodes. One of our best rated episodes, let's say, is the one where you did predictions. You gave us your predictions for the year ahead. And I'm very excited to tell our audience that you are back with predictions for 2026. In fact, you have not released these predictions yet. Maybe when this comes out, they'll be released. But we are going to step through those predictions. We are going to take a quick look back at the predictions from last year. Keep you a little honest here. You can't just throw the stuff into the world.
The multi-year predictions from last year.
The multi-year. You did a plus on it, which I thought was cheating. And we're going to talk a little bit about media and other things given, as we said in the beginning, you're now in the media industry. Maybe let me just start there, and then we'll get into the predictions for 26. So you made this big career pivot. It felt like a big career pivot.
Yeah.
Going from tech, Adobe, to now being in entertainment. Can you let us into why you did that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, my passion's always been at the intersection of creativity and technology. As you know, I founded a company called Behance back in 2006 that was about organizing the creative world. At Adobe, was always working with creative professionals across industries. And in the last few years, spent a lot of time in the world of Hollywood, which I became fascinated by. This is the stack of technology and people, more people than technology, that creates stories that change our lives, that inspire us. I feel like every great technologist I've ever met says that science fiction is a prototype for the future. I know synthetic biologists that were inspired to go into that field from watching Jurassic Park. I mean, this is just like such an interesting space. And at the same time, it's disorganized, it's antiquated. And I became fascinated with how technology can be used to improve the way a studio operates, to improve the way marketing is done, to help solve storyteller and filmmaker problems, and ultimately to help creatives take more creative risk, which I think has always been an interest of mine. So, and then to go to a brand like A24 that is known for helping people take creative risk and doing new things was just a privilege. So early days, but I'm having a lot of fun.
I think it's fascinating. You really are living the forefront of both the opportunity, but also really the concern. What is your take today on where Hollywood, there's a lot of hand-wringing. Obviously, there's the Warner Brothers, Paramount, Netflix. I won't ask you to go too deeply into that. I know you won't comment, but where are we in your sort of feeling of the future for Hollywood?
Well, a couple thoughts. I mean, first of all, I think that technologists tend to, in all cases, run ahead of where the customers actually want to be. A few examples of this that I see in Hollywood. I know technologists that are obsessed with personalized entertainment and a film starring the audience as cameos and people having different endings. And I don't see evidence that audiences want that. I think that audiences want a shared experience that they can all recollect and talk about at a dinner table together. And as soon as I assume you saw something different than I saw, we just stopped talking about it. So I think there's examples where technology will be kind of reined back to like audience preferences as opposed to technologists' dreams. I think similarly, you're seeing the same thing happen with a lot of the new emerging technology for filmmaking. There are these AI native film studios and this effort underway to just use this new technology rampantly. And I think once again, there's a very big misunderstanding. I feel like there are two types of creators in the world. There are content creators who are willing to trade control for speed all day, every day. These are the people that make stuff for YouTube and TikTok. They're making ads. They're making short form content for brands. These are folks who are playing the algorithms. They're always up against time. They don't know what will perform and what won't, so they just try everything. And in those instances, people, content creators who are willing to trade control for speed, a lot of these AI tools are actually great for them because they're literally trading control for speed. Then you juxtapose that with the needs of artists. I work with artists. I work with filmmakers who are never willing to take that trade. They're not going to trade control for speed. They're not going to have the doorknob change colors and the facial structure of actors change, and they want to have obsessive control over achieving what's in their mind's eye in a story. And that's what elevates the craft. And it's really interesting. We're starting to see evidence of stories, films, even ads coming out with a behind the scenes making of in parallel. When Apple came out with their new TV logo, they at the same time launched this episode on the making of this logo that demonstrated the craftsmanship and the humanity behind it. When they came out with their Christmas ad with these like gopher things running around, they again, like even Tim Cook tweeted about, or X'd or whatever we call it these days, about the fact that there was this incredible set of craftsmanship, and craftspeople behind it. And why? I think it's because that they recognize that audiences, just like they crave stories that they can share, shared experiences, I think audiences also crave stories with meaning and craft. And so I think that the tools for artists have actually yet to be developed, and I'm fascinated by that. And I think that as we think about Hollywood, I think a lot of these sort of sound bites are going to start to be reduced to realities of the differences that I'm talking about.
So you're actually getting into some of your predictions. So you've nicely bridged where we're trying to go here. So these
Yes.
are you have such an interesting vantage point that your predictions are very thoughtful. Whether they're right or wrong, they're very thoughtful and they're very helpful, I think, in crafting thematics, which we like to do here at LionTree. So you just talked about the proof of craft content,
Yep.
which essentially was this idea that people want to see behind the scenes
Yeah.
and essentially touch on, really verify the humanism of the content by creating the shoulder cut. Like, it wasn't a machine that made this ad, it was people doing something. And so tell us a little bit about that and how that will become mainstream for advertising and entertainment.
The analogy here is Canal Street and Louis Vuitton purses versus the real thing, or Birkin bags. Whenever anything is commoditized, right? Clothes, alcohol, cars, people end up seeking the more scarce, meaning-infused version of that thing signaled by a brand. That LVMH is essentially in a business of commodities, and yet they're commanding a pricing premium because they have brand designating quality. So now that content has become commoditized to some extent, anyone can make something. I think then there's a question of, will people have a higher bar for what they're looking for as audiences, which will then raise the bar of what's required on the production side, which requires more craftsmanship? And will people actually seek content signified by a brand? When you look at streaming services like HBO and Apple that have are clearly aspiring for a brand signaled degree of quality, is that a good bet or a bad bet? I think it's a good bet.
Yep.
And I think that it's like a natural human tendency for us when something is readily available to crave the more scarce and meaning-infused version of it. So when I talk about proof of craft as an idea going into 2026 and beyond, I think we're going to see a lot more flex from marketers and storytellers of what went in behind it so that the audience appreciates the craft.
Truly understands that this was real.
The equivalent of the stitcher, in Italy, in that beautiful little, factory, making your purse.
And also, I mean, the power of editorial too, right? In the sea of content, it's the
100%.
tastemakers mean more.
Yep.
All right, so that was one of your predictions. Another one is that, and this is a big one, is that there are massive amounts of talent arbitrage.
Yes.
And you talk about, for those who are AI native, essentially younger generations at this point, that is a big advantage, and not, oh, watch out, your job is being taken.
Yeah.
Tell us about that one.
Well, in some ways, this is a contrarian and optimistic view, of which I aspire to be, both, right?
Yeah.
And in this instance, everyone's saying, "Oh my God, entry-level jobs are gone. Why would someone need to hire someone right out of college when they can have the work that they would do, which is typical medial, work that doesn't require a lot of skill, because they haven't been on the job for so long? Why would we want them?" And I go back in my head to, that early 2000s, when social media was clearly the new way that advertising was going. And, these days, companies probably spend more than 50% of their budget on social ads, right? But back then, CMOs of companies like GE, I remember Beth Comstock at GE and others, were just trying to grapple, like, what is this stuff? How would they learn? They wouldn't go to their vice presidents of marketing. They would actually hire these 20 somethings who, in many cases, created these digital agencies that became great companies. And these folks would go in and with a degree of knowledge arbitrage, because they were native. This is what they had in college. They knew more than any of the superiors in the marketing world. They would run circles around everyone else. Here we are again. AI is a big thing, but you go into big companies and they're still trying to hire SEO people. It's not about SEO. It's about AEO, answer engine optimization,
Yep.
right? All the aspects of crunching large amounts of data, optimizing for discovery on chat GPT, LLM type experiences. I mean, this is all a new craft that people in their 20s are native with. And the, folks who've been in the careers and are the experts don't even understand. So my encouragement to anyone listening who is either in this demographic or has nephews or kids or whatever is, like, encourage them to leverage knowledge arbitrage, in this window where they know more than, the people that have more experience.
And you're right, there is a precious window for young or overlooked talent to gain an advantage as early adopters.
Yeah,
So
and it's
optimism among younger people.
Let's do it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Number 3, hardware becomes a more popular moat. Hardware becomes a more popular moat, along with a surge of hardware startups. Now, in our world, like from the banking perspective,
Yeah.
hardware has definitely
Yes.
not been something people. And
Correct,
in fact, this is a
right, yeah.
discount
Yeah.
if you have hardware involved. You're saying, actually not look out.
Something's about to change.
Okay,
And let
go.
me make the case, right? I also, as an angel investor, I was always taught to avoid hardware startups at all costs, right?
For sure.
Hardware is hard, and and again, like the discount as you're describing. Why though? Because the stack of designing, making, distributing hardware has actually always been extraordinarily hard. Fast forward, what do we see now? There are startups like Flux that make chip design more scalable. It's almost like a Figma for chip design. And they also do the automated pricing and quoting and manufacturing orders for the user. And then you have obviously fulfillment as a service. You have a hardware 3D printing for prototypes as a service. All of these parts of the stack that were extraordinarily hard to build, much like even having payment providing was before the age of Stripe. I mean, you used to have to actually build your own store to be an e-commerce store. And now it's like everything as a service. So that stack of services to enable hardware design, development, prototyping, and distribution, manufacturing, fulfillment, those are now becoming automated. And therefore, the friction's gone down. Now, couple that with the idea that, oh my goodness, everything is being replicable through this age of vibe coding software. If you are a pure software play, how many years are we away from you being able to just say to an LLM, make me that software, and it just like, boom, makes it? I think we're getting closer. And as a result, having that tightly coupled hardware software solution that does something unique for you. I just bought a product called The Board, which is like this new game that, for your family, that is actually a physical board with a screen for multiplayer hands, but it's actually like a board game. So it's, in some ways, you're using a screen to get your kids off a screen, which I'm still grappling with. But it's amazing, and it downloads the software. It's tightly coupled with the hardware. You and I are both wearing Whoop bands,
Yes.
right? And there's Auras and all these other. These are all hardware, software products, And that's going to become a moat, that I think more and more startups are going to chase, and now actually can, based on the stack that's changed underneath them.
So I'm with you, and we were fortunate to invest in Whoop fairly early. The Mirror, some people early, and obviously Apple's the OG in many ways of tightly
Yep.
coupling and other things. So it's interesting that that comes back. But at the same time, your number four here is data becomes a less valuable moat.
Yes.
Data becomes a less valuable moat. And I think that's almost in contrast to the hardware, because I would argue that the Whoop and the Aura and these things are basically data capture devices, and yet you're saying data is less valuable. Tell us about
Well,
that.
first of all, I was trying to
Yeah.
juxtapose a better moat of hardware
Yeah.
and a declining moat of data.
Okay.
And I do actually think that data is becoming less of a moat, and hardware is going to kind of become more of a moat. Now, why is data becoming less of a moat? You have the advent of the MCP protocol, where anyone can basically link different data sources and different underlying APIs that go to models with other models. I mean, you have this sort of very quick degree of connection between different services. Obviously, you have all these connectors that every company is making. I'm on the board of Atlassian, and we have, gosh, probably 30 to 50 connectors for all of your different sources of work. And so does Slack, and so does Glean, and so does Microsoft, and everyone's making these connectors. And at some point, everyone's going to have everyone's data. Now, that's driving one thing that I would call the data wars, which is some sort of negotiation of, wait, if you're taking mine, I should take yours. So we're going to see more of that. But I'm fast forwarding and also recognizing that eventually we're going to have vision models on our computer that are going to be able to grab the data anyways. So even if you say, no, I'm not going to let you sync my data, companies are going to be able to grab it anyways. So at some point, if you go on the computer vision level, everyone's going to have everyone's data. So then the question is, if data is no longer remote because it's everywhere, what does the moat become? Now, I think on the data side, it becomes the graph that sort of explains the connection between sets of data that is more proprietary. For example, at Atlassian, their team's building the teamwork graph. Their view is that even if you have all the data of Jira tickets and stuff, what's really useful is knowing who works with whom in the organization on what project and who's allowed to see what permissioning data. Google, Microsoft, these are graphs that are proprietary to organizations that you can't just download, right? Social graphs, obviously, friend graphs, these are the graphs that are going to become more important as everyone has the raw data.
So hardware up,
Yep.
data down. And also related to your comment on data, essentially that anyone could have the data, your number five is ambient listening and summarization will go mainstream.
Yes.
So essentially you're just saying there's more inputs of data. We're getting data everywhere. Any place you look, there's data coming in.
Yeah.
We better capture that. Talk about that one.
Yeah, I like this one because this is one of those that still sounds weird and scary to most. The idea that you would be recording yourself and everyone you encounter all day, every day feels like a blatant violation of others' privacy. It feels weird. It feels Big Brother-ish. It feels risky. And yet, when you actually start to play with some of these tools, these little devices, and this is back to the hardware as a moat piece.
The pendants,
there are companies that are coming out,
brooches,
cloud and whatever else. These are tightly coupled systems that are coming out where they're recording, but then they're actually not keeping the recording. They're just summarizing and keeping the main points and the takeaways from your daily actions. Increasingly, these are going to be happening on very private, locally run models on our device. And at some point, there will be zero risk in the sense that they don't live in the cloud. They live on your phone just like everything else in your life. It's encrypted the same way everything else is on your phone, and it's protected by a password. And at that point, we're going to feel disadvantaged without that experience. It's interesting. I don't know if you've ever served on a jury before. Have you?
I have, yes.
Okay.
I'm a citizen.
So I'm glad you didn't get out of it. I found it fascinating.
Of course.
And one thing I really was humbled by in that experience was the jury room. We would be debriefing what happened that day. And someone would say, I don't remember that. And then you'd have the court reporter come in, and we were all like, oh my gosh, we all kind of invented that part of the narrative in our head. And I just was like, wow, the biases at work every day and the things we kind of make up and fill in the blanks in our brains. What if we actually had this record like how much more accurate and insightful and self-aware would we be?
It's just crazy. I'm laughing because the implications are just crazy. Like it's essentially a wiretap 24/7.
It is, but it's also
Civil liberties,
you're
your
disposing
off
your
moments.
So let's talk about how to make this work, right?
Yeah.
You gotta we gotta discard the recordings. You just have to keep
If you
the
trust that.
summarization, right? You have to keep
Yeah.
the summarization. The summarization should be done in a way that is sort of in a discovery process. It's all conjecture. There's hallucination involved, right? So I'm just saying, like, people have to feel comfortable with this, right?
Okay.
Technology.
Yeah.
And so the document retention policy, if you will, has to be there to make people feel comfortable using things without being worried about being taken out of context.
But that's sorry, Scott. But that's for you to delete. What about me having this conversation with you? You've captured it, you've edited it, whatever. But you've captured me. Do I need to opt into
It's a great question.
allowing this happening?
And this is a design question, right? First of all, it wouldn't say Alex; it would say speaker 1 or speaker 2.
Sure.
And essentially, if you play with some of these products, which I have, it's as if I were taking copious notes, right? So I'm in our meeting. I'm not word for wording you. I'm just sort of saying the general summaries and takeaways. But my macro prediction here is that as these models become local and private and summarized only, and recordings are discarded and the devices get perfected, I think we're all going to need this, and we're all going to live on it.
Does this make the iPhone, let's do the iPhone for this purpose, more valuable or less valuable in the face of these other devices?
It's a great question because it's theirs to lose, right? To me, there is a major shift happening, which I also chronicle here of in one of my predictions here of the shift of power going to these tightly coupled hardware and
that's the
operating
next
systems.
one, in fact. Yes.
So
Great
the answer to your
tee up by
question
me.
we should,
Yes.
is we
Yes.
should get to the next one.
Yes, the power and consumer AI will shift to tightly coupled hardware and operating system providers.
Yeah. So this is, again, another maybe like controversial suggestion here, and I know but I'm not necessarily contrarian. I think that a lot of folks are saying, "Wow, so the small language models and the ability for AI to operate locally, these and open source models you can download and operate locally, are usually a 6-month lag in terms of their capabilities to the frontier models in certain instances." As more of our use cases fall below the frontier of what they're capable of, we're going to be able to go and do more things locally. Now, that's great.
Just so I understand, what do you mean by locally versus not locally? I guess?
Locally means it literally is not happening in the cloud. It's happening on your device with a model that's running on chips on your device from probably, it's less NVIDIA, it's more Micron. It's a different stack of chips and the way AI is managed that allows it all to happen on device without any cloud call. And as a result of that, it's fast, it's free, and it's private.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And how could that not be fielding 80 to 90% of the things we need AI for in the next, within 5 years? And it's really what companies are best positioned for that? Apple, Google. Is OpenAI coming out with a device? We'll see, but certainly if they do, them as well as all these startups with hardware that we're talking about.
This is non sequitur, but as I was thinking of the local versus into the cloud and sharing and the copyright elements of all that, there was the announcement of Disney and OpenAI. I'd love your quick take on what you felt about that deal. Disney invested $1 billion in OpenAI. They essentially allowed their IP to now be scanned, sourced by OpenAI. Do you think that was a prudent move for either, both, none?
Yeah, I'm like trying to wrap my head around it because I think it's a limited amount of their IP that's older. And I think that if Sora is trying to be a consumer product, I do think that people love playing with IP. And I think that in some ways, there's a good argument these days that in the world of AI, IP becomes more valuable because everyone wants to play with it. And despite the technology, there's still copyright law. And so you have to be allowed to. And in that world, IP becomes more valuable. So I think this is one of those first deals that represents the likelihood of IP being valuable for consumer AI, and we'll see if people want to play with
Okay.
Mickey Mouse.
I
And what
probably
happens, what Mickey
right.
Mouse ends up doing.
Right. Well, that I mean, Disney has been litigious over the years around its IP, as it should be, and
Yeah.
it'll be interesting what they allow. Let's do your last two here and keep moving. But these are really good, and I like these. I may have liked these the most, actually. So number 7, the end of waste will become a new benefit of AI as adoption transforms resource utilization and predictive analytics in ways that will materially reduce wastage across industries, curb climate impact, and improve margins. Basically, AI reduces waste.
Yeah, and I think that we're in this phase of a slightly mature phase of AI being used for tools for different industries. And I'm seeing more startups now that are either focused on restaurant procurement or helping big waste management companies optimize their routes, leveraging the data of pickups of waste to determine when to actually send cars and when not to. I mean, we're getting into this phase where all this data, which is more ubiquitous now, to our earlier
Yep.
point, can then be leveraged with AI to really optimize in surprising ways across industries. And so one of the outlooks I have here is just the amount of waste in excess inventory sitting in warehouses, extra stuff being shipped to warehouses that don't even need it, extra food being ordered by restaurants that's discarded at the end of the night. I mean, if you go through every industry, there's always this margin of stuff that is just, in some ways, is still human managed and or in Excel spreadsheets. And now, as you have AI tackle it, it's going to make a material dent, right? And so, what does that do? Well, it increases margins with less wastage and excess inventory and extra shipping and everything else. It certainly is better for the environment because of all the transportation and throwaway and methane and whatever else. And I think humanity is going to become more lean. And it's kind of a cool concept to think about as my optimistic tendencies creep in.
This one is perfectly intuitive, and it's just how far and how wide this gets adopted to do it. But it clearly makes sense, especially if there's motivation behind it, right? If a restaurant can save money by reducing its waste, right, and getting the supply demand, it would behoove them to tap into the AI and do these things. It's just a question of the adoption curve, right?
And so the
And
adoption,
who is supplying that ultimately?
that's right.
Yeah.
And so I think the adoption is obvious because everyone's incentivized in this instance. You're saving money and it's good for the environment, and it's good for everyone. And I also, I think it also goes to the point around margin expansion, across industries over the coming years.
Yep.
We are worried about jobs. We are worried about jobs because people need income to buy things from these companies. But at the same time, these companies are going to uh, increase margins in two ways. One is through this increased wastage and better optimization of everything under the sun. And then the second, which is, unfortunate in some cases, is there's just going to be more talent density. And there's going to be, I think we're probably several quarters away from hearing so many companies reporting their earnings and flexing the fact that they're decreasing their workforce, which is going to be a very strange world to live in. I always worked under a CEO who said it's a failure of a CEO to have to do layoffs and stuff. It's bad planning. And I think we're going to get into an era where every company is flexing its resourcefulness, which is going to be a strange conundrum for the economy.
Right, as we see, they're using AI.
Yes.
Everyone's going to use it. Okay, so now, and finally, number 8, hospitality becomes a differentiating factor of commerce. Hospitality becomes a differentiating factor of commerce. Tell us about that one.
Well, this is an evolution of probably one that we'll maybe discuss from last year. And I've been thinking about for years this wave of personalization and this idea that we all, my cardinal thesis of technology that's great for consumers is that it takes us back to the way things once were that we long for with more scale and efficiency. And if you think about it, for almost 300,000 years, since the dawn of humanity, we have lived in villages and small groups and small towns. Everyone knew each other. There was a comfort of being known and being recognized for the thing you were special at and good at. And then only in the past few hundred years did we lose all that with the Industrial Revolution. Everyone became anonymous, stores, cities, and And the internet was kind of birthed in the same idea that it doesn't know who you are. And so if you go to Nike.com, it treats you as a random person and it doesn't even know if you're male or female or whatever, anything about you. Restaurants, like they don't know your allergies. Like I think we're just in a world where we're anonymous. And I do think that we long to be known and be treated special. And so I've been for years thinking about the role that AI and personalization through technology can make this happen again for us, because I think that would be a good positive
use.
trend.
Yeah.
And so I believe that one word for that I'm starting to get more focus on is hospitality, and thinking about it beyond the sector of course, like hotels and that kind of thing, and restaurants, but also commerce. What does it feel like to be greeted, in a store or in a digital experience by name, to be known, to be, and also how do humans get redeployed for things like that? Maybe if the back of house of a lot of stores that we go to becomes automated with AI and everything else, maybe a lot of those humans are deployed to the front of the house,
Right.
and we get like better service and more familiarity and more human experiences. And maybe that ends up differentiating brand experiences even more than before. So I just think that that's part of, why? Because it's the way humans act. Like we love it when people
Just that
welcome us.
extra little.
Yeah, we love the warmth.
Yeah.
And I don't think that
It's
goes
like
away.
Danny Meyer for everyone, like a scale
Right.
Danny, right? Hospitality for everyone. And are you going to need to log in for that environment, let's say on the digital, or do you think it's just going to be
It's a great
ambient to your
question. Like,
point?
what is the technology that
Right.
enables this? There are companies that are building what I call the memory layer, that allows memory to be portable across different agent experiences. And so regardless
Sort of
of whether
new
it's
cookies, essentially the
essentially
new cookies.
right.
Yeah.
And imagine going to a digital experience and giving it permission to know you, and then boom, everything's synced, and it's like
Be
you have
amazing.
this
Can we get rid of
experience.
passwords and all that stuff? That
I
would
mean,
be, oh my
it's
gosh.
we'll
That
see
would
where it
be-
goes. But
That'd be
it would be
amazing.
nice. We want to be known. I do believe that.
I
We just wanna
believe
know
that
how
as
we're
well.
known.
Everyone wants to be special. Everyone wants to be special. All right. So those were your 8 predictions for this year. Those are we'll check back in a year and see how that. But speaking of checking back, just to keep ourselves honest, I'm going to quickly. You did 6 predictions for 25,
Man, I don't even remember what they are.
and I'm going to run them down very quickly. And then you're going to tell us what you got right and what you maybe got wrong.
Yeah, let's
Not
do
that you get so much wrong, but everyone's
could be off plus or
human,
minus
even if they're helped
5
by
years.
AI here. So 2025 predictions. 1, betting markets as truth engines. I'm just going to run through them.
Yeah.
Betting markets as truth engines was 1. Betting markets got hot this year. There's something there.
They are being cited more for like what actually people believe and what actually happens, so. But
Absolutely.
it hasn't like entered mainstream news yet, but I think it's still going.
You don't think it has? I feel like it has. Like
Actually,
every
it is cited a lot.
election,
It is cited a lot.
I'm a big New York Giants fan. They talk about this coach is the front runner for based on the predictor. I feel like it's cheap.
It would be
but
cool to see a
knowledgeable.
story someday and allow people to bet on whether it's true or not with some sort of verification.
The fake
to be done.
news
Yeah,
betting
exactly.
market. Okay.
That's where I held that story.
Number 2, do-it-yourself agent-built software everywhere.
There are startups now that are allowing you to create agents that go through your email and do things for you. But you know what? It's still, I'm trying a lot of them. None of them are really there yet, but
Okay.
I think I'm off.
You're
by a
on the
couple
right.
years on that one.
You were early
Yeah.
to that. That's fine. Number 3, AR on a slow boil, then a step change. So that's augmented reality.
Mhm.
I feel like augmented reality has sort of come back to earth a little bit. Like people aren't talking about it.
Well, here's a question. Is augmented reality just visual augmented reality, or is it audio augmented reality? Because the Meta glasses did go like mainstream this year.
They did they? I feel
Sort
like you
of.
don't
I mean,
hear a
I
lot.
think they did really well.
And
Maybe not mainstream.
Meta has
mainstream.
pulled back on its spending on the metaverse, I believe.
I'm still bullish on this. Let
and
me
where's
just be
Apple
clear.
Vision? Where is Apple Vision? I haven't heard about Apple Vision.
Warby
in a long time.
Parker announcing a deal with Google this year.
Yep.
We have Meta coming out with the next generation of their audio glasses, and they're still sort of working on their AR glasses. I think the Vision Pro was pro, and I don't think it's a mass product, but I do, the advances are happening. So I would also give myself a B-. I think
Okay,
we're
but are you
correct.
are you bullish on glasses? Will that be a form factor
I
here?
am.
I mean, we've had so many fits and starts.
I am, and also I believe that much like when we were talking about AI in 2016, and everyone knew it was inevitable, but no one knew when and how.
Maybe you did. I was
I
like,
didn't
what is
know.
this thing until a year
In
ago? But yeah.
2016, AI was on the periphery, but no one believed anyone had the data to make it reality, and also the LLM wasn't a breakthrough yet, right?
Yep.
here we are today. It's like AR is inevitable, just like AI was back then. We're missing the form factor, just like we were back then. I feel like there's a little bit of a
But you think it'll be the number one form factor will be glasses, or no? Will it be a pendant, brooch? It'll just be a phone projecting? Like
I think it's going
what's
to be
the prediction?
glasses.
It'll be big
We'll
glasses.
see.
Do you wear any of them?
I wear the Meta ones sometimes with my kids to
And
take
you like them?
pictures, and they're fun.
Okay.
But I'm not.
And this also
it's
gets
not
into
there
all
yet.
these rights and other things, which is kind of crazy. But that's fine. We won't get into the legal side. It all gets figured out, and maybe the market's
Things
ahead of
usually
that.
do.
Okay. AI talent migrates to operators, not labs. AI talent migrates to operators, not labs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was the idea of companies wanting to hire AI talent as opposed to the AI talent only being in the labs that build the models. And I do think we're starting to see that. But I think we're starting to see that in the startup space for sure. But the real sign of this will be when big companies that are not tech companies are building their own teams to build agents and their own AI software and that sort of thing. We are starting to see that a little bit, but I don't think it's as
I
mainstream.
mean, will you get, I'll use an analogy perhaps, and maybe it doesn't work, but in the 2010s, you had all the media companies have digital groups, right? That was sort of these separate hives of understanding the internet and everything like that. Will we have AI groups within these companies and then it'll eventually dissolve into the whole organization, or no, that's not what you mean?
Well, I think that I do think that there will be groups of folks that are focused on AI. I don't think it's going to be like a chief internet officer type of thing. I think that's the wrong approach, and those people went away because the internet was everything, right?
But it took a while.
But I do think there are going to be groups inside companies that are distinct from IT that actually build kind of custom software solutions for the business, because this day where you're either choosing between probably a private equity owned old SaaS product that is kind of clunky at this point and is being squeezed for cash, and you're being kind of every year getting higher and higher quotes on what it's going to cost. The days of your internal small crew being able to just whip that together and deploy it internally, I think those are coming soon.
So that's a big opportunity for people job-wise, right? IT gets pushed up to the forefront in the front lines in many ways.
It's probably adjacent to that team. It's a different skill set per se, but yes, like I think it's a new type of internal software development team is not really a thing. Think about it. Like we're always told to always use a SaaS product, never actually build something yourself. If it's not your core competency. But I think we're now in a world where you can vibe code these software solutions, deploy them, and in some ways automate the maintenance of them, or at least have minimal maintenance requirements to keep them going. And I think we're going to start to second guess the math there.
That's super interesting.
Internal software.
I like that one. That's super interesting. By the way, are you bearish on Salesforce and other SaaS sort of Goliaths?
Over time, I do think that we're going to see far more custom solutions. But I also think that a lot of these big companies have those graphs I was referring to. That are proprietary in themselves.
Okay, that was a very political answer, but I'll take it as your negative. Number 5, AI native small businesses scale without headcount. I feel like this one's kind of started to come to life in a big way, but maybe I'm wrong. AI native small businesses scale without headcount.
Yeah, I don't think that these businesses merchandise themselves in this way, but I do think we're seeing lots of small businesses. I mean, if you look at Shopify and their results and the fact that there's this explosion of small businesses being created, the people that I know that are doing these businesses are using AI up and down and across the stack for marketing, for fulfillment, for projections of inventory, all that kind of stuff.
Focus groups, whatever it is.
Focus groups they're deploying. So it's a new type of small business leader that is doing the math and thinking, I'm not going to raise venture for this. I'm going to get into this small business. I'm going to automate as much of my stack as possible with new tech. And that's exactly what's starting to happen.
And have a great business. I mean, and obviously keep more of it. And then finally, rise of Cognico companies. What is a Cognico?
This is not happening yet.
Okay.
So this probably off by 5+ years. But the idea here is that there are going to be these companies that I think the future model of a company is that every function of the business is really an AI-driven node, if you will, and with data at the center. And that was more of a a playful, illustrative concept of how I believe companies will be formed in the future. I don't think we will see that though until some of these small businesses we just discussed in the previous one become very big, and because that's the
Because they're
question.
built that way. It's from the ground
They're
up.
built that way
Yeah.
natively, and if one of them became a huge brand, you have to ask yourself: would they hire thousands of people, or would they become what I
Stay
call a
with their DNA.
cognition-driven company with AI kind of running all the nodes?
Wow.
I don't know.
Well,
That's
those you did a
futuristic.
good job. I mean, 6 was a little far off, maybe, but in the right there. And you did a nice job with the rest of it. So good job, Scott.
It's a fun
So
exercise.
this is all a way to validate what we said earlier of your 8 predictions might be worth listening to because you've done a good job. I feel like I need we need an Excel. You just gave us the world of everything. Thank you for that.
It's
unbelievable.
It's fun to jam on this, Alex, as always.
Oh my gosh, Scott, you're unbelievable. All right, so I think in the time remaining, let's jump around. Let's just get into things. So I would say you're AI native. What is tell us about your LLM choices in terms of what you use. I feel this is an update. Like 4 years ago, I was talking like, what's your favorite cryptocurrency or something. Now it's like, what's your favorite language model?
Hopefully this age is better than
yeah,
that,
I know,
but,
seriously. And then what is your biggest go-to query on one of these models?
Well, I play with all of them, which is maybe not the answer you wanted to hear, but I just
Fine.
I want to understand and I want to be able to have opinions on how they all work. I definitely am fascinated by the implications for health. I think the idea of having all of your lab results and your Whoop data and your any sort of ailment and whatever else all in one notebook, right? Of AI chats that is there for a perpetual memory of your health is just a treasure trove of opportunity down the line. And my view on a lot of this data is that it will be more useful 10 years from now when it has this like longitudinal relevance as opposed to every moment in time. And so I'm invested in that, in terms of my own use of it. I just think
Just
it's
the
super
health.
interesting. Yeah.
And but what is the model or what is the conduit for your doing
And in this
this?
instance, I think I have like a project in OpenAI and ChatGPT, and then I have all the chats, anything related to health or just sharing, annual blood results or any of that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. I'll download data from the Whoop, and I just like to have it all in there because I have this thesis that somehow it will all be understood, by AI in ways that no doctor
And give some
could ever
insights
understand,
and
right?
leading things. And you need some more B12.
Yeah. And by the way, any doctor who's not encouraging and using that a few years from now is like, it's malpractice, right?
Right,
Like how
right,
in 15 minutes could a doctor give you a comprehensive sense of what sorts of things might be happening if you have a problem without having access to
that
that
makes
data.
complete sense.
So, and I worry about the healthcare system. Like, why are we making it so hard for that to be done by the consumer?
Yep.
So,
But what about in your everyday life? What are
in
you
my everyday
firing
life?
up?
I am playing with a lot of these agent-based personal workflow solutions. So there's one called Co-founder. There are a bunch of others that allow you to mount your email basically, and set up agents that do things for you. So when I get investor updates from companies that I've invested in, I have agents that do certain things with those updates. They summarize them in certain ways. They fill a spreadsheet. They forward them to my operating partner. They just kind of do all this for me. And but they're not perfect yet.
Yeah.
Like they will sometimes flag wrong emails. They will catch wrong things. A founder will make a joke and it will chronicle it as an actual, piece of the update.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny to see this technology that's just like 80 to 90% there. And but to play with it, there's another company called Lightfield that basically, with the same access to my email, is sort of surfacing all the information about and growing basically my network intelligence based on every email I get. It's
I
kinda
just
cool.
feel so woefully inadequate talking. It's unbelievable. You are operating at the highest level because of these tools, which I think is really aspirational. I mean, this is really interesting to hear. And if I can just pull, or our listeners can pull like a couple of these out, I'm sure
They're fun
there's
to
some
play with.
better living here. Switching gears slightly, what is your favorite? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
A24 piece of content.
Oh my gosh, I can't. I
Come
don't
on.
have a favorites, but I will say that I'm really excited to. In a couple of weeks, Marty Supreme is coming out on December 25th. I'm super excited to see this
Okay.
film with my family.
All right. Do you think in 26, here's a
Yeah.
prediction, that we're going to have a fully AI native film that is a hit, if you will? Defining hit in a
I don't
bunch of
think
different
so.
ways. No.
Again, back to like what audiences crave.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that. But I do think that as we go to social media, and I think we're going to see very creative content creators using this technology in very interesting and new ways. And we'll see what happens. I just wonder if the audiences will be engaged by that or will become kind of numb to it.
Yeah.
And that's the question we have to see.
I just find it fascinating how fractured the attention is against all these projects, right? Rob Reiner sadly passed away recently, and not to date this, but All in the Family, when he was 50 million people will watch that weekly at a certain time. And now a hit show is several million, if that. And to the point of like, you can't even, that was communal watching All in the Family. And now you don't even, I'm on episode 2 of White Lotus. You're on episode, don't tell me about it. Like the shared experience is really out of content.
It's part of how we connect with each other. That's right.
But that's a void. That's a big deal. That's why sports has grown so significantly, in my opinion.
It is. Yeah.
And live events.
And the media business really well. It's fascinating to see these ebbs and flows, but now there's a question about are the bundles coming back?
Yeah.
And is live appointment viewing TV coming back, and film releases? I do think that there are some parts of the demographic that are seeing fewer films, but there are also some parts that are actually going and seeing more films, and it's becoming this moment of, again, like a shared experience. Everyone's seeing something the same week and talking about it.
Well, you see, there's I don't know if you've followed Letterboxd, which is sort of a new age Rotten Tomatoes, and they're having
big fan.
Big usage and big spikes in how people engage. It's kind of like a Goodreads of film and TV. And people do want to learn and want to talk about it. And there is this yearning for community, which I think is interesting and probably fits into some of your predictions.
And maybe that's perpetual, right? We'll always want more of that.
I think so. And also live is that communal experience, right? So wrapping up here, I should plug your book. It's several years old at this point, but it's as powerful as ever, which is The Messy Middle. Messy Middle, great book. I've read it. I've used your zoo lion analogy in talking about corporate decision making. I don't know how much time, but I really think people should read this book. It's about your journey, right, of creating Behance and what you see in your different roles. And so, Messy Middle, that's a book everyone should read.
Which we're all in to some degree,
we're
right?
all in it, and definitely read the zoo lion part. Is it in the book, or are you just talking about it?
I think so. I think it's probably somewhere in there.
Which is basically just saying like corporate people are kind of like captive.
Yeah. And by the way, like let's just for 1 minute,
Yeah.
Everyone who is listening, who is currently a leader in a large company, we're all facing the need to take risk and to make bold moves and changes, right? And and I think that there's this always constant fight between the urgent and the important. And important never gets focus unless you have a way to continue to socialize it, and you have a forcing function to make a decision. And so that point is really around, as leaders in a company, how do you kind of rattle the cage, so to speak, to get a group of people to make a decision, even though it doesn't feel the need to be made today.
Yep.
And I think that that's one of the things we as leaders have to do more of.
I love that. You just can picture the line. It's very visceral. Any podcasts or books that you recommend these days, especially maybe in terms of learning? How do you know all this stuff? Like, what are your resources? Anything people should do and read or look or listen?
Gosh, I mean, I have really, my life in the last few years has definitely been transformed by a lot of the Substacks that I subscribe to, of independent experts that just take it upon themselves to write and share. As I entered the world of entertainment, the first thing I did was I just subscribed to a lot of folks who study Hollywood and the history of storytelling, and I'm learning so much, right? So it's just an amazing world now, where instead of reading a book about stuff that is 5+ or 10 years old, like you can actually be up to the minute. And of course, like following people on platforms like X and everything, I think you have to kind of bask yourself in the intellectual discourse of the day to start to see the patterns. And
so any one or two that you want to shout out here?
Geez, Greg Eisenberg, right? Has a great set of kind of AI insights in his newsletter. I think this guy named Lenny, who kind of writes a great he does a podcast and also writes a great newsletter for product leaders. And just like write in Lenny and you'll find him.
Okay.
I mean, those are a few that come top of mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, Scott, will you come and do this next year?
Let's do it.
But I
have to I have to
keep boning up on these.
Keep up with this world,
yeah.
which is sometimes hard. But
well, you're doing a good job, or your AI is doing a good job.
It's always fun.
Maybe
to
there'll be robot
this.
Scott soon for
I'd
next year.
love to outsource this to AI someday. It's just not ready yet.
It's not ready yet. But this is really, and where can people find this when you launch it? When will people see the predictions?
I write one newsletter a month. It's my exercise of holding myself accountable to getting these ideas out there and getting feedback. And I do it at implications.com.
Implications.com. Scott Belsky, everyone. Thank you, Scott, for joining. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Alex.
Good luck with 26.
See you, everyone.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the KindredCast channel on YouTube. Stay tuned for more conversations with leaders in business and beyond.